Hey, happy Friday, everyone. Hope everyone has some awesome plans for Mother's Day this weekend. Just reminding you, if you haven't had time to put something together to honor your mothers, make sure and do that. Make it a good weekend. So today we wanted to talk a little bit about background checks. And we at Stratus in the HR department, we get questions and requests to discuss background checks quite a bit. So we wanted to talk about the pros and cons of doing background checks and employers doing background checks. I do want to preface what I'm going to say today by saying that make sure if you're running background checks on potential candidates that you are extending an offer of employment before you actually run the background check. And one of the best practices that you can do prior to running a background check is extending the offer, and in the offer paperwork, just outline and say, this offer of employment is contingent upon the successful passing of the background check. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody that running background checks, and if you're not doing that, make sure and amend your processes to allow for the extension of the offer of employment prior to running the background check. That way you stay out of legal trouble. One of the pros that I want to talk about today in running background checks is that it helps to improve the chances of hiring a good candidate and avoid hiring a bad candidate. So essentially, when you run a background check to confirm if the candidate has a criminal history or what their employment history is, what their background level of educations are, when you're verifying those things, those help you to make a better hiring decision. And if you make a better hiring decision, then you reduce the risk or the chance of making a bad hiring decision, which we all know has significant cost to it. So we want to avoid those scenarios where we make a bad hiring decision, but we also have all of the information that we need to make a really good hiring decision. The next thing I wanted to talk about is by running background checks, you improve your chances or you reduce your chances of workplace violence. So the U.S. Department of Justice recently published a study where about 1.7 million days of work days are lost to workplace violence type related issues. And that's a lot of time that people miss due to those issues, and those can come with significant costs too. So running a background check on candidates can improve your chances of reducing those risks. The next thing I wanted to talk about would be safety concerns amongst vendors or the general public. So if you work in an industry where your employees have a lot of interaction with the general public or vendors and things like that, you want to avoid candidates that might have a history of convictions for sexual related crimes, things like that. So those background checks will help vet out some of those issues, especially in those industries where you have a large interaction with the public or vendors, things like that. The final thing I wanted to talk about is another pro can be that you're going to reduce your risks of hiring somebody that may have had trouble in the past with embezzlement or theft. So I'm talking mainly about candidates that are hired in like a finance or an accounting department that would have access to petty cash or controls that aren't in place for potential embezzlement type situations. So if a candidate has had some issues in the past with those issues, a background check can pick those things up and you can make a better hiring decision. Some of the cons with background checks would be that they are expensive. A background check, for a basic like Social Security verification, those types of things, can run you about $20 to $25. And then clear up to almost $300 when you're talking about hiring an executive level position. So a con can be, especially for a small business, that they do cost. And especially when you're hiring for multiple positions at once, or you're interviewing for multiple positions at once, and you're making those offers of employment, those costs can stack up quickly when you're running multiple background checks. The other thing is that it does take time to complete these background checks, especially when you're drilling down to the county level, where some courthouses lack in technology solutions. Their records might not be online or accessible by these databases that these companies run the background checks through. So the only way that you can drill down to some counties is if somebody physically goes out to the county and checks the court records. So if that's the case, then a background check can take up to 2 weeks before the results come back. So they do cost money, they do take time, but I think they're definitely worth it. Here at Stratus.hr, we provide background checks for our clients. If you're interested at all, please reach out to one of our HR consultants. We'd be happy to discuss what our costs are for background checks, the time that it takes, the different options that we have. But I guarantee you these background checks can help you make better hiring decisions and avoiding some of the pitfalls that can come with hiring without some of these checks in place. So have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you next time.